just actually ensure people's economic stability through government resources that may be coming through people who, the same people, i.e. Lloyd Blankfein, the CEO on a gap year, who they may have to maybe pony up a little bit more to keep these people afloat. Because he became a billionaire, mind you, off the taxpayer dime through the $824 million or $1 billion bailout. I think it was million. That his bank received. So, like, that is it was really kind of galling today just to hear him see that. Oh well, you can't torch the economy for too long. Extreme measures to flatten the virus curve is sensible for a time to stretch out the strain on health infrastructure. Like, we have public health officials the world over, or the country over, saying we need more restrictions. Like, him coming out there and saying that and putting people in a lot of risk is, I mean, it's quite bold, like, given the bailouts that he's received from the government in times of crisis that he kind of walked right into. And the government had his back, but he's like, go back to work. And I'd like to see him put himself in that position. I said, like, would Lloyd Blankfein want to be exposed to a lethal pathogen? Like, I'm sure he's probably pretty comfortable right now.
Did that same article say how much money the government made off of almost all of its bailouts?
No, I just heard the number of $824 million. $1
billion. I'm sure it's got to be
$1 billion. Yeah,
from bailouts.
No, probably to Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs was just singularly $824 million.
What that was his salary?
No, that was the bailout Goldman Sachs received.
Well, you see, bailouts are the conventional inflammatory term, but what it actually happens a lot is, so let's say you're a bank, right, and you loan money to ABC Car Company, and normally they're a great credit, they pay all the time, but, you know, you force them to shut down, so now they don't have a way to pay back their loans. So the bank that holds that loan has to say, okay, here I have a loan that's not performing. So now my assets are much lower than my liabilities. So what do I do then? I go to the Fed, and the Fed has to say, okay, I'll lend you money against that loan. I'll consider it money good. I'll put it in abeyance. I'll hold it off. So they do things like this. So it sounds like a bailout, but it's really lending them money against assets which
they pay back,
in a normal
granted,
economy
low
are
interest.
actually very good.
They pay back very low interest, right? Like, you would say that, at least.
Who does?
The banks, though.
Well, global interest rates are very low.
Especially the ones that they bail out, especially the ones that they have to pay in the wake of a crisis like this. So, I mean...
Look, I think what's going on now is definitely not a good idea.
With what?
But it's better than the alternative.
But, I mean, what do you think about a possible, like, a moratorium on rent? Like, some of the ideas that have been put out there, maybe from the left wing of the political spectrum, that would kind of smash this false dichotomy.
Everything is on the table right now. So, what you would ideally do is, you know, the house is on fire, so you need a fire hose, and it's going to mess and hit a lot of things that are not accurate. It's not going to have enough teeth on certain things. It's not going to be, it's going to enrich some people, and there may be some checks and balances that don't work, but you have a fire, and so if you want to go with a garden hose and do very precise things, yeah, that would be ideal, but the scale of the conflagration is prohibitive, I think.
Well, I mean, I think you can use a fire hose, but you can also put a fire hose on the nice house, or you can put it on the house that all of the American people live in. So I mean, it's not. I mean, I think like you could do a lot.
Well, having lived through the 2008 crisis, I can honestly say that was in many ways scarier, but this is in many ways much worse because that was a financial crisis which we did not know the depths of, and here it's a health crisis which we will certainly get to the end of.
It's much more obvious what's going on.
Exactly. So I think the Fed is being supportive. I think it stinks. I think we have a $1 trillion economy. We have a $20 trillion economy. We had a $1 trillion deficit. I think the most obvious foot fault or screw up was running a $1 trillion deficit when the economy was going great. That is going to go down in history, I think, as one of the biggest colossal blunders ever. Did nothing to even forget about.
And it's not like with that $1 trillion deficit, it's not like we even did anything good with it.
Forget about reduce the debt. Because you know the difference between deficit and debt. Deficit in one year, we not only did we not run a balanced, if we run a balanced budget or maybe make more than we spend, we could have paid down the debt. But here, not only did we not do that in good times, we spent way more by the tax cut. And now we are forced to spend way more. So,
and we are forced
the
to
debasement of the currency is, I think, the bigger issue.
And I think what we're also forced to do is we're forced to accept our government giving a lot back to the same people that got a big break during the tax cut.
So who would that be?
That would be the wealthiest people in this country.
So anyone that owns stock in financial institutions has had their net worth decline by 30% at least.
If they have it all.
So where the rescue is coming is in terms of so banks, they have assets and then they borrow. They have cash, they have deposits, and then they lend money. So where the rescue is coming is helping in the loans that they've made to make them solvent and to protect them on the loans that they've made. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like anybody's writing a check to Lloyd Blankfein. Or, yes, I agree, their salaries are cosmically too big. But in terms of what's going on right now, I don't think there's any doubt that the Fed and the Treasury have to do something, and they have to do it soon. But what they're really talking about is sending everyone that made less than $100,000 $2,000, and banks are saying, like, if you own a hotel, it's closed. If you own an oil rig, it has no contract. The bank that owns it, that has a loan against it, they can either foreclose and take it over, but what are they going to do with it?
Yeah, and that's like, I definitely agree with you. Like the Fed, like the government at large, they definitely have to do something. But the question is, what are they going to do? And I think really, what conditions will they put on it? Like, who will they? Like, will, for example, they say, oh yeah, you can't foreclose, or you won't be able to, or if they do give these different companies money, are they going to force it to, or will they force them to pay the salaries of the people who are being laid off all across the country?
So I was thinking about that too, and I wasn't quite sure whether it'd be better to say, okay, American Airlines, don't lay anyone off, or would it be better to say, lay them off and we'll pay them unemployment? I mean,
yeah,
that's
I mean,
right?
either way, like the money has to come through some way.
Right. So
Yeah.
the layoff is just semantics, right? Because either way, the money that's going to pay them is coming from the government.
Yeah, so that is, I mean, it's going to have to get through some way. We do have some other stuff to talk about, so I will let you go at this time. Thank you so much for dropping in and giving us another different perspective. So really appreciate that.
It's my pleasure, and I hope things turn up soon.
Yeah, hopefully something happens. All right, yeah, so we have some other stuff to get into today. We're talking about this crazy new miracle drug that President Trump is talking about. It was one of the key moments of his March 20th press conference about the COVID-19 pandemic. And again, in the March 23rd, he talked about today, I believe. President Trump touted this hydrochloroquine, a common anti-malaria drug, as a potential treatment for the illness COVID-19, even while top health officials beside him urged caution about it. It's prescribed for many years. This is prescribed for many years for people to combat malaria, which was a big problem, and it's very effective. It was a strong drug, Trump said. I sure as hell think we ought to give it a try. Dr. Anthony Fauci, the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases at the National Institutes of Health, and a beacon of evidence-based policy in the administration's botched pandemic response, this is again reporting here from Vox, has been asked by a reporter whether the hydroxychloroquine could be used against COVID-19 after reports surfacing this week of doctors using it in other countries to treat patients. Fauci was clear the evidence was thin and anecdotal. Their extent exchange was bizarre and revealing, though. But what is the deal with this drug, you ask? With the spread of coronavirus across the world and the increasing numbers of infected people, there's now an international race to develop effective treatments for COVID-19, and hydroxychloroquine, hydroxychloroquine. Let me just call it this drug from now on, because it's just me stumbling over it. It doesn't make any sense. But, so this drug is a less toxic derivative of chloroquine, another anti-malaria drug, and it's emerged as one of the front runners. So this drug, the less toxic version, is an appealing option mainly because it's an off-the-shelf drug. Companies already know how to make it, and there are low-cost generic versions available, so that does deal really pretty well with the affordability question. And the drug has already been tested and improved for use against malaria and to treat inflammation in conditions like arthritis. I know someone actually that does have arthritis, and she is freaking out right now because this drug is flying off the shelves. She's like, "Oh, how am I going to treat my I have some inflammation, she has inflammation, I need this drug, or I'm going to be in a lot of pain," and the drug's just falling off the shelves now because of President Trump's words of, this drug can treat coronavirus, for no reason. So Chinese researchers showed in lab cell culture tests that this drug can slow infections from the virus behind COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2, blocking it from entering cells. Some of the doctors in China and South Korea has also used it to treat patients at the time, and a recent study by researchers in France found the drug was efficient in clearing upper airways from the virus from 3 to 6 days in most patients. That timing is important because an untreated infected person can transmit the virus for 20 days or more, even without showing symptoms. So it's important to shrink the amount of time that a person could carry a virus in order to limit the spread. So it would be very, very helpful, because one of the things about this virus that makes it so scary is how contagious it is. Such research results are promising and open the possibility of an international strategy to decision makers to fight this emerging viral infection in real time, even if other strategies and research, including the vaccine development, could also be effective, but only in the future. French researchers wrote, "We therefore recommend that COVID-19 patients be treated with this drug and azithromycin to cure their infection and to limit the transmission of the virus to other people in order to curb the spread of COVID-19 around the world." But the researchers only looked at 36 patients, and only 26 actually received this drug in the study. It's a very tiny sample size. Hydroxychloroquine can also have side effects like headaches, dizziness, and diarrhea, so it's not something that doctors can blanketly prescribe all over the place. So it's a very, very by-the-book explanation. It's not just pop a pill and you're just like, "Oh, I'm good now, I'm feeling great." But yeah, so the study wasn't blinded, meaning the patients knew what they were getting, nor was it randomized. That does limit the scientific merits of the study somewhat. That said, there are plans for wider testing and at least 6 clinical trials for this drug are recruiting patients or are